in the lower sections of the table that they were trying to move him for, but the fee was just too astronomical at this point for them to try to make that consideration. So we have a Janssen who could possibly be someone, early League Cup ties, early FA Cup ties, possibly. Llorente is probably actually going to get a lot of run out there. It's going to be interesting to see when they start rotating the squad to the point where Llorente and Kane are on the pitch at the same time. That is actually very exciting for me in terms of play. But as Tim mentioned, to start this section of the segment out, he's very excited that Llorente is here, actually. And you know who else is very excited that Llorente is here? My wife. Oh my God! I pulled him up on a picture, and she was like, "Who is that?" Kind of let her know who that was, and I think she has a new favorite.
Yeah, you have to fire a shirt now, Ken.
Yeah, I know. God.
Hey Kenny,
yes.
What do you think of all these players choosing to join Spurs based on their preference to work with Pochettino? Because 4 of our 5, Davinson Sanchez, Serge Aurier, Fernando Llorente, and Juan Foyth, they had competition, or we had competition from bigger names in Europe that have, consistent Champions League pedigree, that have won titles in the last 10 years. What do you make of that?
The Llorente one is a little, I won't say perplexing, but it's the one that makes me think a little bit more, because he is 32 and he's done this and been there and won Europa. The whole bit. He's done it all, and it's got to be for what is happening here. In his press releaser, he talks about that it was his dream to come here and play another couple of years. That's why he signed the contract, because he firmly believes that what's going on here is pretty amazing. Play in Wembley, open up a brand new stadium, all that stuff. There's things maybe behind the scenes that we don't know about, as Sammy alludes to a lot, that have to be the draw for him, right? For these other guys, it's the chance that youth gets while playing for Pochettino. That has to be part of the selling point, the recruitment tactic, much like a college football coach walking into a high schooler's home and trying to recruit that blue chip prospect from high school ranks into their college, and they sit down on signing day, which is a thing here in the States for those in Europe that don't know, with basically like baseball caps or ball caps of all the different schools lined up in front of them, and they reach out, grab the one that they're going to go to, and they put that hat on, and that kind of announces where they're going to school and who's won that opportunity. For us, I can't imagine that these young players don't have those same aspirations and dreams. They all have the clubs that they loved, all this other stuff, and it's got to be one thing that separates them, and for me the catalyst is Pochettino and how he plans to play youth players and develop them immediately and not put them on the outs. I don't know, Vass, do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, this ties in actually with something we were saying about Janssen a little while ago, and you said about whoever it was, West Brom couldn't make the deal happen, etc. The reports coming back after the event were that Janssen himself decided not to go.
Right.
Now, it's admirable that he wants to stay and fight for his That's a good sign. You don't see too much of that in players anymore. I just want to move on, get some regular football. And I could have understood it if he did that. And I go back to the time when he signed for Tottenham from... is it Alkmaar? He said at the time that he saw Tottenham as the best place for his career development, and working with Pochettino was a factor.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing that full circle to players like Foyth and everybody else, I think that we've got a guy in charge now that players want to come and. And Tim's absolutely correct. These guys offers from other clubs. I understand PSG were in for Foyth. Aurier had options as well. Llorente had Chelsea as an option. So it's superb that these guys are choosing to come to Tottenham. So it kind of highlights where we are right now in the overall scheme of things.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that a little bit, Vass, and to continue to answer your question, Tim, is that there's a person here that gets left out of this talk quite frequently that needs to be mentioned, and that's the agent. The agent is not going to push these players to go anywhere where they're not going to eventually have that opportunity, and then because of that opportunity, as soon as they achieve first team football, they're going to maybe get a bump in wage unless they're coming in like an Aurier or a Sanchez, who are automatically going to be put into that, or a Juan Foyth or even Gazaniga. Eventually, they're going to get a first team game, at some level, and Tottenham has almost an unwritten policy that when they do make that first team jump, we've seen it with Kyle Walker-Peters, with Booth. They have signed recently in the last couple of weeks new contracts because they made that leap. These agents get paid based on their client's salary. So the agent themselves is also going to be pushing a young player. They identify these clubs that promote youth and promote from within and say, I want you to go there. Or I think it would be a good idea for you to really consider this as part of your future because you will play faster. Or at least have the opportunity. So I think that's also a part that goes into this, Tim. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be a part, but also you think about it from the agent standpoint, the way they make their fees is based on commission from the transfer fee. They get a percentage of that. So it's interesting that, some of these players aren't going to clubs where they would pay a higher transfer fee that would make the agent more money, and they're deciding to come to Tottenham.
I think they're looking at it one step further down, Tim. I mean, Dele now is kind of the benchmark. You pick him up for £5 million. He goes to Tottenham Hotspur, and he gets game time, and now he's potentially, I don't know, let's just say 150 million worth of potential transfer fee. So the agent's looking at that and saying, if I've got a young client like Juan Foyth, where do I want him to go? PSG, where I get my cut of a 10, 15, 20 million pound transfer fee now, or Tottenham Hotspur now. And if all pans out in the next couple of years, he's worth 50 million plus, and then I can work another move to PSG or whoever. Hopefully that won't happen from our point of view, obviously, but it's got to be churning around in the agent's mind. And not only that, if a young player goes to Spurs and gets game time and does well, likelihood is, the way Daniel Levy works, he's going to tie them on a longer term contract. That means renegotiations, new fees for the agent. So again, it works out okay. And I think this is kind of working in our favour somewhat as well.
Yeah, I think that is definitely part of the case, and I think it's a three-headed monster. It's the club, it's the player, it's the agent, and a lot of that talk happens well prior to the window. I saw some stuff out there on social media talking about, people were just going mental, especially the last couple of days, and a lot of people were just sick and tired of it. Done. I'm going to go do something else. I can't even pay attention anymore. And there were some reminders out there that back in the day, before social media, no one knew what happened until the paper came out the next day. Vass, I'm sure you do. You recall those days, don't you?
Sadly do, Ken. Sadly do. Biggest for me was I was only a kid at the time, and I was on my way to school, and a couple of my friends, also Spurs fans, yelled out to me from across the street and said, have you heard about Spurs, Vass? I said, no, what? We've signed our dealers. And of course I had no idea. I hadn't seen the paper yet.
Yeah.
And the headlines that day were Tottenham scooped the world or whatever, signing our dealers and Villa. And that was pretty much it. Nowadays, it seems with social media and the instant information that we get in, we're hearing things like Spurs consider preparing a bid for X player, and then it becomes something else, and we're hearing about a potential interest in a player at such an early point that the number of days that pass between that becoming an official bid and then contract negotiations, medicals and everything else, you could be talking a month, 2 months passing, and we're in the know, as it were, every step of the way. And that's where the frustration comes for fans looking at that and feeling that it's not moving, nothing's happening, and everyone's dragging their feet. But clearly, this is the way that the system works, and we're just hearing about stuff far too early now. I much prefer the way it was before, when we'd be able to sign a player and find out about it the next day or on the day or whatever. So, yeah, it's different days, I suppose.
Vass, do you think that because supporters are a little bit, quote unquote, in the know a little bit and geeing on their clubs via social media, does it play into the club's urgency or decision making at all, or do you think clubs are just like it's white noise and they really don't care? They're just going to run their business the way they run their business?
Absolutely the latter. They don't give a stuff what we say, or how loud we scream, or what players we urge them to sign, or how we think they should be playing, or who we should make. This is just, as you said, white noise in the background, has no consequence whatsoever. They're going to conduct the business in the way that they think is best for the club, and everything else is just secondary.
Yeah, especially at a club that's of the level that Tottenham is. I mean, if you're some Premier League North club or something like that, where maybe the supporters keep you alive at some point in terms of financial help, maybe you do have a little bit of a listen. But at that level, we're not talking about the players, obviously, that we're talking about now. And speaking of players, I want to switch gears just a little bit. We've kind of talked about and alluded to Tottenham being window winners in terms of what happened in this window. But Vass, I think you give them a B-. I think that's been the consensus across the pundits that I've read, about a B or a B-. Had a very good window. Wasn't an A+ window by any means, but we may not have the capacity to do that. Now let's get into some of the window lickers, if you will. One of the things that really became interesting to me as this window started, built up, and then kind of unfolded, was that there were a lot of contracts that either recently signed or not recently signed that were tied to players who put in the dreaded transfer request to their clubs. Coutinho, Alexis, Diego Costa, Mahrez. There's a handful, I believe, of other players that turned in transfer requests that were simply and flat out denied for whatever reason. They couldn't come to the right deal, or the club simply said, you're not going anywhere, as is the case probably with Alexis Sanchez. Contracts, whether they have 5 months left on them or a just recently signed 5-year deal, seem to have little impact anymore, at least here recently with the clubs. Tim, is this the club's way, do you think, of taking back control a bit and testing the waters of what keeping possibly a disgruntled footballer on their team will or won't do, that they're going to hold their feet to the fire to these contracts? And what do you think happens further down the line, that they will be maybe less willing to sign a 4 or 5 or 6-year deal?
I don't know. I don't really care too much about what other clubs are doing with their players, but for the scum to let some of their top players go on less than a year of their contract, I mean, I think it's just dumb. They can leave for free at the end of the year, and you're getting nothing from them.
Yeah. In terms of Alexis and in terms of Ozil, right?
Yeah, in terms of those two. I mean, with Coutinho, Mahrez, I mean, I wish they would have left, because I think they make their squad stronger. I wish Coutinho would have went to Barcelona. I wish Mahrez would have possibly went somewhere abroad. I'd like to not have to face them. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, from that standpoint, I care about it. But as far as what's going on with their own internal struggle with their clubs, I really could care less about what they're doing and how things are going behind the scenes for them. I mean, I hope it goes as poorly as possible.
Yeah, and I guess the question becomes, Vass, what if Tottenham were in this position? What if a Christian Eriksen, say, for instance, turned in a transfer request and we said, no, you're staying. We're seeing this now happening with other clubs. Are the clubs taking the stance that, hey, careers are short. They'll play for us if they want to play. If the club agrees we're going to retain them, how do these scenarios play out in your mind in the long run, do you think?
Yeah, I tweeted out a few days ago to say something